Welcome to Drama-Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. I'm your host, Jess Cording. I'm a registered dietitian, health coach, and author, and I'm here to help you streamline your wellness routine and establish a sane, more balanced relationship with food and fitness so you can reach your goals without losing your mind. On this podcast, we'll talk about nutrition, exercise, self-care, mindset, and more. I'll be bringing you interviews and expert insight on the topics that matter to your health and wellness. Hi, and welcome back to the Drama-Free Healthy Living podcast. I'm your host, Jess Cording. In today's solo episode, I'm going to share 12 lessons I've learned in the past 12 months. So I heard this on a different podcast of just taking some time to reflect and really think about what you've learned in the past year. Because I have a birthday coming up, or I guess, yeah, as you're listening to this, it's a birthday week for me. And I was like, well, I could do 38 things about being, for 38, but the older you get, the less motivation I find there is to when you're turning 21, 21 things about being 21. Yeah, no, I don't have time for that. Neither do you, I'm sure. So I feel like this has been what I will look back and call a really hard year, a growing year, a year where I learned a lot. I think I'm still processing some of what I learned, but I did want to share, just as I was thinking about this episode, 12 big takeaways from the past year. And some of this, most of this, it is not things that are totally new. It's more things that I found to be especially important to be reflecting on throughout this year, or things that became more important. I was thinking about the words that I was thinking about for 2023 in general. And I was like, I find that by the time I get towards the end of the year, I feel like I've lost the thread most of the time, or the year just did not go at all how I thought it would. And, but that said, two words that I was focusing on this year were align and empower. And I like to think that I did continue to prioritize things that help me feel that way, or to be able to recognize more quickly when I was in patterns that felt out of sync with how I wanted to feel. We can't be perfect ever, but I think awareness of where we hold ourselves back and where we get stuck can be really, really valuable. So without further ado, these are 12 lessons that I wanted to share from the past 12 months. So number one, take time off. I've been really bad at taking vacation. This year, I did actually plan a real honest to goodness vacation with my husband. And I have to say, taking my own advice on this one it was really a good reminder that when we take a step outside our everyday, when we give ourselves permission not to be trying to always produce and, get things done, not to be so focused on productivity and output and just experience things, or just relax, that can help us recharge and refresh. And it really, really does matter. Another big lesson for the year, so number 2, is to let yourself be seen and be vulnerable. In the past year, it wasn't until my second book, The Farewell Tour, that I ever talked publicly about my experience with navigating PTSD related to sexual assault as a teenager. And I think I got held up not held up, but I think I held myself back from talking about it because I was so afraid of what other people would think. And I that is so dumb. I think I was caught up in thinking that people would think less of me, and maybe people do think less of me. We can't be everything to everyone, and that can't matter. I think that you have to honor your truth and do what feels right for you. And I got to a place where I felt that it was more important for me to share a story of survival and what has helped me on my journey, how it continues to help me, because that could help other people. It's so common to have some kind of trauma in our life. I spoke about my own personal experience. In early 2023, I wrote an article for Mind Body Green's Invisible Illness series, which I'll link to in the show notes. But that was the first time I ever published anything really public about my experience. And I focused much less on the actual trauma and more about how my body and brain responded to it, what the effects were. Because that's, for a lot of us, I think that's really what it's about, is to what happens afterwards, right? Because there's these events that happen in our lives and there's nothing we can do about it. But what we can do something about is how we respond to events, how we take care of ourselves, how we tune into our bodies and our brains, and what we do to support healing. So I think that being vulnerable and sharing your story is really, really scary. But I found this year, uh, it was just really inspiring to hear from other people about their experiences and what they had been through and the kinds of support that they need. So I'm really, anyone who reached out to me and shared their story, I am so humbled by your trusting me and your sharing with me. And, I going forward in my work, I'm continuing to be here as a resource and to have conversations about these difficult topics. And, for me to get to a place to do that, it really took being vulnerable and talking about what I had been through. And there were a few things like that in the last calendar year, but just to, show up authentically and to just stop caring about what other people are going to think about who you are. Somewhat related, another lesson, so number 3, is that you can set the tone for how other people treat you. It's very easy to get caught up in reacting to things and in, how things affect us, right? And we can't control how other people treat us. Like at the end of the day, like we can't, be behind the scenes controlling things like puppeteers. But when we respect ourselves, when we prioritize our own well-being, when we show up authentically, um, when we are straightforward about what we will and will not put up with, that helps set the tone for how other people treat you. You have to treat yourself how you want to be treated. So that's something that, I think for anyone who can maybe relate to being a people pleaser, it can be a little scary, but it is really, really important. That's something I know I'm going to be continuing to focus on going forward. So number 4, reach out. This one, I have, and I wrote about this a little bit in the farewell tour, but I have a tendency to keep things in, especially when I'm going through it in real time. I'm very open about sharing things I've been through when they're in the rearview mirror and I have some perspective. But when I'm in the thick of something, when I'm in it, when I'm working through it, it's, I think I sometimes have a hard time with reaching out to people. I don't want to be a burden. I don't know how to talk about things. I don't want to make others uncomfortable. And this ties into that, that there is a lot of power and vulnerability that sometimes we're afraid to step into. But I often have a tendency of like worrying about like wasting people's time, like, things like that. Or just not knowing how to talk about things, I think is something a lot of us deal with. I'm very grateful to have a wonderful therapist and a partner who I can talk about anything with. But, there's always going to be things that you need to talk to someone who's been through it, or you need to, you want to reach out and get support that maybe you can't get from a therapist or a partner. And, one thing that I really found incredibly helpful in the past year, I think one of the things that I will definitely look back and say, cracked me open in a lot of ways. Every time you think you can't get cracked anymore open, like life is like, actually, wait, you can. Having a miscarriage right before my 37th birthday was something that just, it's something so many people go through. And I really needed to talk about it with people who've been through it, because it really, for something that's so common, it's so isolating. And, being willing to share my story and reach out to others who've been through that experience was so healing. And it continues to be a lifeline for me. I often will say, like, I'm curious to know what I will say about this time in my life when it's like way in the past and I know how everything worked out. But just, I was initially a little bit nervous to reach out. And I don't think my sister listens to this podcast. So like, I'm probably okay to say this, but I had a miscarriage like 3 or 4 days after finding out she was pregnant again. And I felt a lot of shame, and it was difficult to talk about it publicly when she was, in a very like a happy place. And, I was scared to talk about it around her because I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. And it was just really helpful to be able to have like friends that I could text or women that I connected with through support groups and such, just to like be able to reach out and get the support that I needed. Because in order, for as a healthcare provider, for me to show up and take care of the people who pay me to take care of them, like I needed to take care of me. And, so that was one area where I was definitely challenged this year and pushed myself to reach out and really, find that support. And another way of reaching out when you're, not from coming from a place when you're in emotional crisis or you're dealing with something difficult, but sometimes just reaching out to people that you want to get to know, that you want to collaborate with, that you want to, be connecting with. Like, that's one of the things I love about this podcast is that I have the opportunity to have incredible conversations with people, and some of whom go on to become friends and collaborators. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And, sometimes it just puts, reaching out and saying, hey, I love that thing you did. Would you like to talk about this in an article on my podcast? And just learning about others and what they bring to the world, and just spreading the good stuff. I love that. So reaching out has a lot of benefits. And somewhat related to that, asking for what you want and need. Again, maybe this goes back to the people pleasing disease, but this can be really, really scary, right? Asking for help or stating that you have a preference. This is the topic that does come up sometimes on this podcast. I think one of my favorite examples of this is the podcast I did this year with sex therapist Emily Morse, where she talks about, talking about what you want in bed, and, how for some people, and I know this was something I dealt with when I was very young, and like navigating all of that world for, like as a youngster, like just the idea of like, oh, I can have preferences. Oh, this is cool. I think also, even little things like, speaking up about what you need health wise. I find that in our healthcare system, and I'm saying this as someone who is part of our healthcare system, like as a patient, you have to be your own advocate. And, if you have a provider who's not, addressing your concerns, like, you have to push or find a different provider, which I know is not always easy, but, asking for what you need, what you want, can come up in your work life, in your personal life, but just do not be afraid to put it out there. Because there's, if people don't know what you need, don't know what you want, how are they going to give it to you? So as scary as it can be to say, this is what I want, and this is what I need right now, do it. It will, keeping yourself quiet will only hold you back. So, okay, number 6, this is something that as a double Sagittarius, and I joke about having an inner fire-breathing dragon, something I thought a lot about this year, I was reflecting on in a few areas of my life, was, that you don't have to burn it all down when you get restless or scared, or you realize that you don't like where you are at the moment. This is something that I don't really have any desire to actually go back in time and live a different part of my life. I like to think it gets better and better. But like, if I could just tell younger me like one thing, it'd be like, you don't have to burn it all down. Like, you don't always have to start over. You don't have to, burn bridges or say goodbye or, just destruct things in order to, start anew. Like, it's a natural part of life that we go through phases. And this comes up for me most often in my professional life. It's funny, when I was younger, it felt like in some ways the opposite, where it was like my personal life was always in turmoil. And I wouldn't say that, and I'm not trying to say that my professional life has been tumultuous at all. I am very, very blessed. But I am someone who has a tendency to get restless, or there's so much that I want to do that, it's hard for me sometimes to like stay present and focused and like not try to run onto the next shiny, object in terms of projects and such. And this was a year where I really pushed myself to think about the bigger picture and think more long term and really focus on when there were instances of discomfort, how to address them in a constructive way instead of like, yeah, let's just burn it all to the ground. I'm so that was something that I did push myself to focus on. And if I could go back in time, I'm curious to see what would, how different things might have turned out if I hadn't been like, oh no, this is done. We're gonna just throw this one out. Um, so we will see. And I don't know who's to say about the 3 or 4 different novels I have like hanging out in a in a proverbial drawer, right? Maybe one day I'll get back to those too. So number 7, don't have to do everything yourself. Um, this is something I'm going to continuously be working on, but damn, like hiring help or outsourcing what you can, or just letting go of things that don't really need to be done. You don't have to do it all. I really hate when people will be like, well, Beyonce has also 24 hours in a day. And it's like, yeah, but Beyonce has an entire team. Beyonce is a superwoman and she is a force of nature and just incredible, but she has a lot of help. And most of us don't. So, like, don't put pressure on yourself to do all the things. Pick the essentials, what you can outsource, see if you can allocate resources to help yourself do that, but do not pressure yourself to do everything and to do it perfectly. And somewhat related to that, I think we're at number 8. There will always be more work. You don't have to finish everything all at once. Maybe it's just my age. I think a lot about time and numbers and, try to avoid the comparison trap with certain things. And, I think we do live in a culture where we are pushed to expect things right away, instant gratification, that we should have arrived at some destination or, have like overnight successes and things. And I think that there will always be more to do. The idea of inbox zero, I just find that to be a just a losing game. And yeah, that is, you don't have to finish everything all at once. It's this is something I'm constantly working on, is bringing my to-do list to a realistic place, the must-do list, and just really trying to keep it real. So, there's a lot of definitely there's always going to be that pressure to try to get as much done as possible and be productive. If you don't deal with those feelings, please give me your secrets. But this was something I found myself thinking a lot about this year, was that you really don't have to finish everything all at once. It's more valuable most of the time to do something right, make it meaningful, really put your heart and soul into it instead of just like trying to rush to get as much done as possible. So number 9, this is something that's been important to me as long as I can remember, but prioritize relationships. That's really, since the pandemic, things have changed so much in how we live our day-to-day lives. Maybe there are some people where everything has gone totally back to normal, whatever that means. But I know a lot of people in my world, we've, and myself included, I feel like we kind of woke up a few years out on the other side of a weird portal, where like everything is different. You live in a different place and, like your work life balance looks different. Maybe your environment is different, and the way that you connect with people is different. And I think sometimes it can be easy to get swept up in thinking you always have to be focused on like producing things, and, transactional kinds of relationships definitely come up in the media space. And I think one thing I have always really tuned into, and I think I get this from my dad, because this is something I saw him model, is that it's really about nurturing relationships and paying attention to who you feel like your best self around, and, just really paying attention to who you feel like you click with, and really just allowing that to be a driving force, just really nurturing relationships and not being so focused on like, well, like having to like fulfill needs or anything that is more like, I remember going to a networking event once a long time ago. I was still a student, so it was a really long time ago. And there was a woman there who, she you were like randomly matched. I forget, you like go down a line and like talk to each person, like, talk to the person across from you or something like that. And, I was speaking with her and I was introducing myself, and she was quite a bit older than me, another career changer, if I'm remembering properly. And I was, asking her like, oh, how can I support you? Tell me about yourself. And she was like, well, I don't think you can help me. You're just a student. And me being like little Miss Bull in a china shop who's not even 5 feet tall, internally I'm like, well, fuck, I can. Yes, I can. I'm a student, but like I'm also a human. I write, I do stuff in our community. Like I didn't say all stuff out loud, but I was like, okay, well, if you ever need anything from me, I'm here. I'm a resource. And interestingly, years later, our paths did cross again. And and it was it reminded me that, I was really glad that um I hadn't been a jerk to her, and really said what was in my mind at the time. But I just remember being so struck by that of like, just like being so close when you have an interaction with someone, um, just to like just discount them, like just because they quote unquote can't help you in the moment. Because I don't know, something I've been reflecting a lot on, especially in the latter half of this year for whatever reason, is like in some ways I like to think I'm just getting started. We live in a culture where it's so easy to compare ourselves to, I keep saying this, but it's true. It is so easy to compare ourselves to what others are doing and think that we should somehow be in that place. And I really like to believe that sometimes just things turn out better than we could even imagine, And so why limit the possibilities? And why waste time getting down on yourself about what you haven't done or what you haven't accomplished? Like why block your energy that way? So this is just something that I have found myself thinking a lot about this year, and I felt really fortunate to have connected with just some really wonderful people, some of whom you will hear on this podcast, and just in some cases getting closer to people in the dietetics community, in my local community, and just really nurturing and prioritizing those relationships. And of course, putting emphasis on my relationship with my husband. That's he's a I joke about him sometimes, but he's just like so wonderful. He is like the most nurturing human I have ever met. I'm very lucky to have him in my corner. So number 10, I put down, invest in what lights you up. This is something that I've been, I definitely will say when I was really early in my PTSD journey, it was hard in some ways to trust my intuition because I was like, well, if my intuition led me into such a dangerous, violent situation before, like, how can does that mean I can't trust myself going forward? But something that didn't seem to ever waver was just my inner sense of like that inner pilot light, I call it, in the farewell tour. I remember having a really, really great conversation when we were working on the book with Elvis Costello about this, and just how some people turn to substances to, either feel inspired or to numb things out. And I was saying that for myself, like that's a really huge part of why, drinking and drugs never really became part of my experience for trying to find my way, because I just didn't, I was so scared of like snuffing out that pilot light. Like for me, my writing was always like that light for me. And I often have felt, when I'm trying to make decisions or when I'm paying attention to how people make me feel that I meet, it's really about what lights me up, and like really paying attention to that, because there are always going to be things that we're approached where they feel like an obligation, like we should do it. But then there's those things, that you think about them, you're like, yes, this feels great. This feels wonderful. I can't wait to be part of this thing, and to really pay attention to and invest that. And sometimes that means saying no to other things. Sometimes I know, if I'm talking about work related things, it means investing time, energy, money into things that feel good, that feel right. In personal life, I know I was talking earlier about taking time off. For me, taking a vacation with my husband, like that was something, like just thinking about taking that trip just like made me feel so alive and excited. And So things that do light us up, and again, I've talked about her before, my mother, the hypnotherapist, like I was raised being taught about the law of attraction and that the energy we put out has a lot to do with what we get back. And so I do believe that when we are in a more positive, higher vibe state, that tends to help us attract more of the same. And, and investing in the things that light you up can be very, very helpful in, a sense of overall well-being in terms of, well, however you define success, whatever you are focused on, it can definitely help with that and make the journey to wherever you're trying to go a lot better. But on that note, number 11, don't rush. I 11 is my favorite number. Shocker. I know. Here I am just talking about my, my new age kind of upbringing. But, I find that it is easy to rush and to put pressure on yourself to have accomplished XYZ by X date. And I thought this was especially pertinent for a birthday episode, because birthdays have a tendency to make us think about, oh, well, I'm this age, I should have done XYZ by now. And I've always tried really hard not to think about that because it doesn't matter because we never know how long we have. We really never know what's around the corner. We can hope and think and speculate, but we don't know. And I think it is really important to just be grounded in the present. And, as a trauma survivor, I do sometimes have a hard time with that. I definitely feel that sometimes my that inner fight or flight response sometimes still manifests in future tripping. And when I start to get uncomfortable in a thought, I start to overly plan things. It's just something I've noticed about myself over the years. And, it's okay for things to take time. Like I was saying a moment ago about how sometimes what is ahead might be better than we could even expect or imagine. I really do like to believe that. And I think that sometimes when we try to force things, when we try to rush things, the experience is rarely that pleasurable. We often miss steps or we feel like we made mistakes or that, later, I don't know about you, I have definitely found that when I tried to force or rush things that I'm like, I should have taken the time to think that through, or I should have, if I had known, if I'd been a little more thoughtful, it might have been even better. So I think that it's okay to, not to rush. You're where you need to be. And then for number 12, lastly, don't put your life on hold. This is something I personally have had a hard time with in terms of planning fun things. And I'll be really candid here. A big part of that was, related to, trying to start a family. What a silly term. Because you are a family. It doesn't, just having a human child doesn't somehow make you a family. But I think that I definitely would be well, I can't plan anything far in advance because what if I'm pregnant and how many months and math, all this bullshit. And, one thing I will say after having a miscarriage, I was like, you know what? I can't do that anymore. I can't keep my life on hold for all these, unknowns because we don't know, maybe there are people that know stuff like that. Maybe, if you're that kind of psychic, but I don't know. I think it's important to just, again, pay attention to what lights you up, what you want to do, and to know that you can figure it out, and it's okay for plans to change also. Again, can be very hard for sometimes people who are very type A or people pleasers, myself, to accept that sometimes we have to change things or tweak things. But if there's something that's important to you, don't wait. Even if you're taking tiny steps towards it, if there's a goal that you have, don't wait till things look a certain way in your life to pursue that goal. Take a step today. It can be something really tiny, but something that's meaningful. So don't wait. Don't put your life on hold. That's something that when my father was, when he had accepted he was dying, he was very, something he said to me early in his cancer journey was, I don't want you to lose momentum. Don't put your life on hold just for me. What he didn't realize was that it was really important for me to let go of some things and really prioritize spending time with him and our family instead of all the, crap I was doing, trying to achieve and, do all this stuff with, you have to prioritize what's important. And that said, if there is something that you're I really want this in my world, in my life, you can make it happen. Don't wait for permission or until things are calm enough, like, because that's never going to happen. Like, come on. If I had a nickel for every time a client has said to me, like, well, like when things calm down, I can focus on exercise or I can focus on eating or sleep. But like, and then that time doesn't come. Of course not. Like, that's just the nature of the beast of being a human. So I just want to share some of what I've been reflecting on as I get ready to welcome a new year. And as always, you guys, I am so appreciative that you're here with me. I hope you find this podcast useful. I know I don't do a ton of solo episodes, so thank you for being here. And as always, I would love to hear from you. Maybe take a screenshot of yourself listening to this, share some thoughts, tag me on Instagram. You can also, if you like what you hear, please feel free to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. They do matter and help me to continue to bring great guests and other content. So yeah, and like, share, subscribe, connect with me. I'm on Instagram at Jess Cording. I also technically on Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it now, and Facebook is Jessica Cording Nutrition. You can find my books on Amazon. And as always, guys, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to Drama Free Healthy Living with Jess Cording. We'll see you next time.